Hey folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Forgive the voice here down in Texas. I would say it's the humidity in Houston, Carlos, but it's really not that hot, so it's probably my fault. Like most things in life, right? Does that sound enough for you?
It sounds legitimate and accurate, I would say.
Okay, well, I'm a little under the weather, but should be hopefully good to go for the national championship game down here tomorrow night between Michigan and Washington. In the meantime, the Lions just beat Minnesota to win their 12th game of the season, tie a franchise record. I think the last time they did that was 1991 when they got to the NFC title game and lost to Washington. But you were there today, Carlos, at Ford Field. What did you see? What were the biggest takeaways?
It was a nice atmosphere. You know, they had a nice presentation before the game to, unveil their NFC North championship banner. A little, it was nicely put together, a video presentation and honoring that. It's some fireworks, which I'd never seen before, like kind of flashbang fireworks. So it was a nice atmosphere for the fans. They played well enough. They just could never quite get enough distance between themselves and the Vikings to pull all their starters early enough. And that's kind of what led a little bit to Sam Laporta getting hurt. Their sensational rookie tight end had a leg injury, a knee injury. And Dan Campbell said it didn't look as bad. It wasn't as bad as it looked because it looked bad on the TV replays. But it wasn't necessarily great news, so they don't know if he's going to miss time. That would be a big problem for them, I think. But it was a risk they knew they were going to take, and Campbell talked about that, and you can't just not play anybody, and it was worth it, right? Because they're going after the number 2 seed. They had to win today to try to make that happen. So, but it was nice. It was nice for the fans to get there. To kind of welcome the team home and celebrate that victory. And the one little thing that was kind of fun was that they had fun being emphatic about whenever Dan Skipper, number 70, reported as eligible. And the referee here, Brad Rogers, had a kind of was joking around with the players and the linemen, and whenever Skip would report, he sometimes would tell the linemen, like, there's nobody else, right? It's just number 70. Okay, 70 is reporting as eligible. So they made sure to double cross their T's and dot their I's because all the problems last week. So a nice atmosphere, 12 wins, like you said. And now it's we're going to see who they get in the playoffs.
Could be the Rams or the Packers, probably one of those two, right?
Or the Seahawks.
I guess it could be the Seahawks, right?
Yeah, it's kind of all up in the air.
All the history.
Well, when people are listening to this, they'll think we're idiots. How did you not know this, Art?
Yeah, well, when we record, it could be one of those three, but each one comes with its own histories. The Seahawks, the more recent history. The Packers are, the Packers. The last time they won the division, the Lions did. They lost the Packers at the Silverdome, I want to say, and then of course the Rams with Matthew Stafford. We don't need to. That's its own thing. Everybody understands that. Staying with Laporta though for a second, Carlson, you wrote earlier in the week that you agreed with Campbell playing the starters, and talk a little bit more about why you wrote that and what your argument for that is.
Yeah, I was kind of comparing them to the Rams, where the Rams were sitting everybody, for their game against the 49ers, and increasing their likelihood that they would get the 7th seed. The Rams would either get the 6th or 7th seed, and if they lose that game, then they go to 7th seed, and they got to likely go to Dallas, and so it's just a much tougher road. And the Lions I like that they were being positive and hopeful and saying, look, we want the number 2 seed is an advantage. You win the first game, you are guaranteed to get a second home game. It makes sense to make your road as easy as possible. You playing backups. You certainly going to protect against injury. But you got to play somebody, right? And so you can't just. I don't think the Lions have enough players to just play an entire 22 people, roster of backups. But it's to me, it was a risk worth taking. And they could never get enough of a lead. I would say like a 3-score lead, something like that, even maybe 24 points or something might be something where you would feel comfortable in the second half of pulling, your starters off the field as much as possible. But, it comes with its risks. I mean, nothing is risk free. So if it does end up hurting them, I still don't regret that. I still don't think that they were wrong to try to get the number 2 seed. You can never predict, right? I mean, who's going to get hurt and what's going to happen. But sure, it could have been, it could end up being a very costly decision. But I just like the idea of them being, committed to their idea of trying to control their destiny as much as possible, make something happen rather than sitting back and saying, all right, we're just going to take the 3rd seed and it is what it is. And we'll get one home playoff game and then probably have to go on the road and have a tougher road ahead. I like that they're thinking of a longer playoff run, not just, hey, one playoff game at Ford Field and that's it. We're good enough. That should appease everybody.
Yeah, I agree with you, by the way, for whatever that's worth. But I would also add, I think there's another point to be made here. I think there's another reason to play your starters, at least in the context of this Lions team. And that's what happened last week in Dallas. There are a couple other reasons, but let's stay with that one. I mean, they lost a really tough game. They had one more game, obviously, against the Vikings. And I think Campbell decided that he wanted to get that taste out of the mouth. He wanted that completely behind him. Yeah. Wanted to get a win. And he maybe even hinted at that today in the postgame from what I tried to listen to some of it, but just maybe he didn't, maybe I misheard. But just this idea of being ready. And I think he did talk about that, right? We're ready. Mm-hmm. He wanted to see it on the field. And I think that's a really good, you're right. There's risks. What happened to Sam Laporta today is really, really unfortunate. It could have happened to him in Dallas. Frankly, it could happen in the beginning of the first quarter of the playoff game next week, right? You just, sure. You don't know that this is how football is, but just the idea that you want to get your guys ready, you want the loss behind it. This isn't the team that's been in the playoffs for the last 4 or 5 years. Then maybe it's different, right? And they know what to expect, but he's trying to gain every psychological advantage he can. And he wanted to kind of roll in that way, and I don't blame him at all. And by the way, he did make it sound like Laporta would not play, or the probability that he would not be available was pretty high. He said he called it bad news. He said, "You're right. It didn't look as bad as it didn't. It's not as bad as it looked, but it's still." I think he said bad news, right?
Meaning, I remember the phrase he used. It wasn't something like not devastating news or something, but
right. But the kind of thing in the regular season probably cost him a few weeks, but just. Yeah. The good news is it doesn't, by saying bad news, it's probably not an ACL, which would frankly cost him most of the next year. That's different.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, so it didn't seem like this is catastrophic and he's done, there's no hope. But it didn't seem like he was gonna be practicing anytime soon necessarily. So it's always hard, it's right after the game. There's so very little information. We'll talk to him on Monday and find out more, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's there was something to not, they hadn't lost back-to-back games all season. And I think you're right. I mean, if you're coming off that Dallas game, that's a good point, Shawn, is you had a really tough loss and then they come here. And yes, even though you're not playing your starters, to take another loss going into the playoffs with 2 losses. And if you're playing your backups, I mean, they beat the Vikings 20-10, but the Vikings hung around. I mean, they just did not. And that was with the Lions playing their starters against a 4th-string quarterback, Justin Jefferson, and a 4th-string quarterback, and no T.J. Hawkinson. So they very easily could have lost with a whole string of backups.
Oh yeah.
So then you're going in. What kind of momentum do you have? You have just the leftover seething anger against Brad Allen in Dallas. That's, I don't know if that's really great for you. And this is a team also. Let's not forget. Point was made today was they haven't been to the playoffs. This team franchise hasn't been to the playoffs in 7 years. I think maybe Decker's the only one left from that regime. So it's not like, oh, well, whatever. We've been here before. We're the Chiefs. We're always in the playoffs. It'll be okay. This team doesn't have those postseason reps. And Campbell was asked about that. And there's something different to that, and Goff, I asked Goff about it too. And it's a different animal. The energy level changes, and sometimes the mentality changes of trying to do too much and trying to, whatever, ramp yourself up for an extra important game. And they have to be reminded, as Campbell said, that it's the same thing. Don't do somebody else's job, stay in your lane, do your assignments, all that stuff, stay focused and disciplined. And it's hard. It's an emotional game. It's, whoever they play here in Ford Field, it's going to be emotional. And, so it only helps, I think, when you're coming off a victory, even if it's unfortunately costly for potential injuries. I think overall it'll serve the team well.
Yeah, at some point it's just bad luck, right? It's just tough luck.
Right.
I mean, it's easy.
First play of the playoff game, anybody could get hurt. Absolutely,
no question. It's just tough luck, and plus there are examples the other way. Guys that coaches that set their guys. Jim Caldwell did in Indianapolis one year and had a really good team, right? 14-15 win team, maybe. I can't remember exactly what the record was, and they lost.
Yeah.
And he lamented that a little bit. I mean, you're always gonna, if it doesn't work out, you're gonna go back and say, well, should I have changed or made a different decision? But I'm with you. It's nice to be on your side. I like that. It feels especially.
You're in a weakened state, so it's easy. It's easier.
I'm feeling a little bit. I know I've been down here in Houston and haven't left the room much in the last couple of days. It's funny to be back in Texas. I mean, I was just here literally for the Cowboys-Lions game. But in any case, well, let's talk about what it means not having Laporta. I liked what you wrote in your 3 questions. Your first question about asking Dave Burkett who the Lions could least afford to lose, and I want to talk about your answer and his answer when we come back, and what the Lions can do if they're not going to have Laporta. But first, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. So what are they going to do, Carlos? I mean, first of all, maybe some readers saw, I've seen this, and I've seen your 3 questions by the time they hear this, but just to kind of reiterate, it was the top of your piece, and it's the most important piece. But can you kind of lay it out there, the conversation you had with Dave, just ironically, but that's the poor use of ironic or irony. But coincidentally, you just happened to have that conversation at the beginning of the game.
Yeah. We were talking about, because that was the whole thing, is like, do you play your starters? Do you not? Whatever, how much is there to be gained? And so we're just looking at the guys coming on the field, and I asked him, it's like, who could they, besides Jared Goff, who could they least afford to lose in this game? And he said, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I'm like, yeah, that's clearly St. Brown. He's their engine. He makes everything happen. He had a fantastic 70-yard catch and run touchdown. He's just a different level player for them on that offense. And then after that, I just started thinking about it more, like, well, who else could you lose, and who would be the biggest loss? And I think it would be Aiden Hutchinson on defense. He's their big star. He is the guy who gets to the quarterback and makes the biggest difference. It was nice for them to get Aleem McNeil back, the defensive tackle. He definitely helped. And they had a decent game up front today, and Pascal made some plays. And I think on Wuzurike, I'm not sure if he got a sack or was called back, but but Hutchinson, I think, is number 2 pretty clearly. But then after that, I would say Laporta, because you don't have somebody else who quite does his job his way. And he's got a lot of credit for doing everything that he has to do as a tight end, blocking the run game, blocking the pass game, catch passes, obviously, is, his big thing as an offensive weapon. And they just don't have anybody. James Mitchell just doesn't have that skill set. They used him after Laporta left. And then they used Dan Skipper too, in like jumbo tight end packages, and that was the reporting thing. But he's a special player, and I asked Goff about that afterward, and it's always the cliche, next man up and all that, and that's true. But you got to move forward. There's no option. But he did admit that when I asked him, you worked a long time on chemistry with him and timing, and that's been all the way through since mini camp and training camp and everything else. It's been the better part of the year. you don't just plug somebody else in there and it's magical unless you can get, Rob Gronkowski to unretire or whatever. But so that's going to be the challenge for them is he's a vital component of their offense. And without him, I don't know what they can do. They may have to sign somebody, who's a free agent out there, but it's gonna limit. Campbell said, I asked him the same question. And he said, no, I think we have enough pieces, on offense to be able to figure something out. And they do. They have a really good offense, so they can make up for it. More passes out of the backfield or whatever. I think that Ben Johnson, my favorite coach, Shawn, as you know, he's creative. He'll find a way, but you just don't replace somebody like that easily. So that's going to be a big challenge for them. But yeah, I think of course, when Jack Fox had a really nice game punting today, I'm like, well, maybe the punter would be really hard to replace too, but he flips the field for you. But at least of the regular position players, I would say Laporta was the third guy. So maybe they get lucky. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe he gets to suit up in some capacity in a week. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a big challenge.
It's funny you're joking about the punter, but that's no joke. I was at a game last week. It's known as the Rose Bowl, and Alabama has one of the best punters in the country, and Michigan's punter's not so great this year. And that was Michigan won the game, but the amount of times Alabama flew the field because the punter was critical.
Yeah.
And no, there's no question. Jack Fox is a weapon that way. I would, as much as I loved being on your side in the first segment, I hate to do it. I like that place. Feels good. Feels cozy. Be honest with you. But I agree. Obviously Laporta's a great young player, and who knows how great he's going to be, just as importantly. But because I imagine he's going to keep getting better for a bit. I'm with you. He's right there. I would contend, not by a lot, but I would contend that after we're taking golf out, right? And we say Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I completely agree with. I would say Frank Ragnow. And partly because we have seen this season what it looks like when he doesn't play and when Laporta does. And it's not pretty. And I know it's, we think, well, okay, it's the center or whatever, and we haven't really seen without Sewell. But even Sewell is as great as he is. The importance to Ragnow to the run game up the middle, to setting the linemen, to the chemistry with Goff, and just his nastiness up in there. He's a big part of who they are. And, maybe it's a toss-up. I don't know. But I think about what they've looked like without him when they've had Laporta. Laporta's been taken out a few times this year. And so, I guess we're both saying that Laporta is hugely important. But I'm with you. They've got, Campbell mentioned they have stuff, and they do. Jamison Williams has very quietly worked himself into an important part of this offense. It's kind of crazy that we're saying that, but it's what do you think of him, and can they go to him a little bit more? You're talking about Ben Johnson and his toys. What do you think there?
Yeah, he would definitely, if he's back, he probably would be back for this next game. They could use him. They've done it, in different ways, end arounds, whatever it might be, jet sweeps, things, But I don't think that. I think that the tight end position is unique, though, that way, and it's traditionally a pretty hard position to learn quickly. The learning curve is steep, so that's what's been even more impressive about what Laporta has done. And I'm with you though with Ragnow. You can make this case with Penei Sewell as well, because he's the fiery, he's the captain. He's the fiery guy. He hypes them up right before the game. He's probably their best lineman, I would say. But Ragnow is vitally important because that position is so important. So you could definitely make that argument. I think, and how I feel about the offensive line, but, it's a massive humanity. It's a wall. You may be able to plug different people in. Clearly, Frank Ragnow's better than Graham Glasgow as a center. So, but it's not like they don't have anybody there. Glasgow's starting right now at right guard. He just slides over. And there's really the drop off between Ragnow, and I think that's what I was kind of getting at. I mentioned the baseball war, win above replacement, is the drop off from the next guy, and the drop off from Ragnow to Glasgow is not as great as, let's say, at least for right now, Laporta and James Mitchell. That's a much steeper drop off, or Dan Skipper in jumbo tight end packages. But so that's the concern. That's, I think, why I would say 3. But yeah, it doesn't. You can go either one probably, and it would be a huge loss for different reasons. But yeah, can't argue too much with you.
No way. Yeah, it's interesting to think about what they've looked like when they've missed him, and we haven't really seen him without Laporta. We've seen defenses kind of take him away, and that's going to happen from time to time. To me, that's where Jameson Williams is important too. But the other thing about Ragnow, that it's not just the run blocking, is Goff's under more duress. At least it was at Chicago, and I'm trying to think the other game. Ragnow didn't play against Green Bay either, I don't think, on Thanksgiving. If I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I'm trying to remember. There was another game, though, where it wasn't just the run game. You could see Goff under more duress because Ragnow wasn't in there. And it's funny to say. You're right. I know how you feel about offensive linemen. And I don't disagree with you there. It's just that the importance to those guys, to this particular team and this system, and we've seen when they don't have him what that looks like. But in any case, you're right. I agree. The drop off from Laporta to Mitchell is probably greater. It's just the importance of that spot. That's where it gets a little more tricky. But
you would rank quarterback as the most important, and then probably center, left guard, left tackle, right tackle. So in that order, like 1 through 6, those guys.
I would go quarterback on every team, right? And then it depends from there on how you're built, and what kind of quarterback you have. You got a mobile quarterback, right? But for this quarterback, he needs Frank Ragnow. He also needs Benezo and Taylor Decker, and
he needs protection. He needs time. Yes,
he does. But and it's funny because people criticize him. I don't know how much you thought about this, but people criticize him. Some, well, yeah, he's time. He gets time. He's good, like every quarterback. But that's not true. When he gets time, he's almost elite. I mean, when he gets time, he's really, really good. And that you can't say that about every quarterback that gets time. Mm-hmm. I've always thought that was a bit of a disservice to him. I agree. If he's under pressure, his production falls way, way off compared to the elite mobile quarterbacks, no question. But when he gets time, he's about as good as it gets. Maybe not quite, but close.
I think that's the thing that works well is, between him and Ben Johnson. And Ben Johnson, puts them in positions to succeed and asks them to do things that, Goff can do, and that works well. So when things go well and he has the right amount of time, or the play action pass, works, and the run game's working, all that stuff, when it's working well, you're not asking Jared Goff to roll out and throw a 50-yard pass. You're not asking him to do an RPO and take it up the, gut or what, so he's not asking him to do things that Goff can't do. That's what's smart about Ben Johnson's play calling. But you're right, and a lot of times he's in the right position. He's there and the receivers are running the right routes. He's getting enough time to throw and he's making those passes, and he can be very accurate. So that's his strength. And that's why it's working so well. But absolutely, the line is a huge part of that. The communication with the center is a big part of that. His route runners are a big part of that. So it all works, cohesively. It all works in a complementary fashion. So, hopefully they don't get hit with too many more injuries that are going to limit that. But Goff doesn't get enough credit for playing within the system and doing as much as he's done.
Well, and we'll see with Laporta too. I mean, obviously, the better the defense, the more they'll miss him.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And that's one thing too with that, I haven't looked at this, when you're talking about, going against Green Bay or, whatever it is, and it didn't look the same, without Ragnow. And you also have to look at the, who they're playing against, who are the defensive tackles, who are the edge rushers, how much pressure were they bringing, all that kind of stuff. It's because not every defense is the same. Like today, Daniil Hunter played really well. So an excellent player for the Vikings, and they really did a great job of limiting the run game. So
They did.
That's one of the Vikings' strengths. But their secondary isn't amazing. So of course, it was smart to pass a little bit more. So who knows? Whoever they draw in the playoffs, that'll also play into it. A little bit of luck, right? Of Laporta's gonna miss the game. They're gonna happen to face someone with bad coverage linebackers, and like he could have exposed them or whatever. And,
For sure.
So you never know.
Sure.
You can't control it. You can't control anything.
Well, and the other thing too, Carlos, and we can talk about when we reconvene for our weekly version of this podcast. We'll get in a whole lot more. We'll know first of all who they're going to play, and we can talk a lot more about that. But I just want to remind listeners, and I know listeners know this, but you watch games, right? You all watch games out there that are listening. Carlos, you've been watching these games for a long time. It doesn't matter. Obviously, the seedings. I mean, yeah, they're blowouts in the playoffs sometimes, but for the most part, these first few weekends, you got to make a play or two, and that's what it comes down to. All right. I mean, they're hard games to win, and you don't normally roll people over. And it doesn't matter who comes in next week. They're going to have to make a play or two, probably in the second half, to win it. That's the life in the playoffs. I mean, it's the life in the NFL to a degree too, but especially in the playoffs.
You just triggered the Lions fans because they're going to say, yeah, who's going to make a play is the referee, like they did in Dallas, and picked up that piano. And where's Brett Allen? He's going to call a, whatever, illegal formation. And, yeah, as we've seen with the Lions, a lot of things can happen, and they can, there can be a weird call that goes against them. But yeah, absolutely. Traditionally, the playoff games are tighter. You got better teams going against each other, so the margin of error, is smaller. The gap in level of play is smaller. So it's going to be something that the Lions are going to have to account for. And I think at this point, the thing that they have going for them, I think one of them is that they played a lot of primetime games. They've had the spotlight on them a lot this year. The season. So it's not like they're just rolling in there. Like they came out of nowhere. They were 2-15 last year and they just caught fire and whatever. Like they've been under the lights. They've had the pressure. They've played well. They've responded to it. You could almost say that they embraced the spotlight. So those are good things for them. And that I think that bodes well. I don't think the moment's going to be too big. Anything can happen. You can lose. Weren't the Tom Brady's Buccaneers a wild card team that got in and won it, a few years ago in the Super Bowl. So, of course, it's Tom Brady, but yeah, I mean, anything can happen. They know that. They'll be on guard for it, but you just want as much help, as many of your guys as you can get. That always helps, I think.
Oh, for sure. And they're going to miss Laporta. I want to make that clear. All right. Well, I have a little bit of voice left, and plus we promised our fabulous producer, Mr. Robin Chan, that we were going to keep this one relatively short. I'm not sure that we have. Sorry, Robin, but we need to get out of here. You got to get back to work. Can we just hope you don't mind? Can we just acknowledge our buddy, Mr. Kurt Dozier? And what he's meant to the Detroit sports scene, what he's meant to the Detroit Free Press, what he meant to, so many people over these last several decades. All the images, but beyond that, you've seen all this too, Carlos, right? Just how he made people feel. How many times you walk into an arena, a stadium, a ballpark, and see him, and just his presence, what that would do for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Kurt was, not only the utmost professional and, really solid under pressure and that's hard in this business. It's not always, easy for people to respond to that. Photographers have an extremely difficult job. But as a person, he was just a joy to be around. He was fun. He was a little bit of the curmudgeonly, guy.
Occasionally,
Right? Yeah, but I'm like that too, and we would have fun. I'd always joke with him about, obviously everybody shoots with digital cameras now, but I would always ask him, you got film in there? Or you got some color film in there? And he's like, what are you talking about, man? We haven't used film for 20 years. And we'd go back and forth. And it was always fun to talk to Kurt. He loved fishing. He was a huge fisherman. So, and one of the nice things I always remember when we talked about fishing, not that I knew anything about fishing, but when I'd ask him about, hey, have you been anywhere or whatever, he'd talk about his fishing trips, or he just went down to the river on a boat, on a day. He enjoyed that just as much as any trip. And he's like, you know what I love about fishing is just that it brings everybody together. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're a millionaire or your guy is, doesn't have a house or whatever, and, you get out on the river and you're all the same. Everybody's, enjoying it the same way, doing the same thing, and, brought people together. And Kurt was like that too. I mean, there's nobody you could talk to, nobody he couldn't talk to. He got along with just about everybody. I never saw him have a crossword with somebody. So his presence, not only as a professional, but as a person, will be sorely missed.
Oh, there's a huge, huge loss for obviously his family first, and the Free Press family, the photo staff at the Free Press, where he's mentored and meant so much to so many for so long. You're right. He was up for anything. I remember one time I was in Minneapolis. It was the Final Four. Michigan State was there, so it was before COVID. And, I had a little group. This is back when I was a little more adventurous myself, but I had a little group going to this Vietnamese street food place. And Kurt was like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, come on with us. He's like, and I told him he's like, he's kind of on the fence. I said, come on. So he did. And he just leaned into it. He wasn't necessarily somebody that went out and did that sort of specific thing. We all, he fished, I go eat, whatever. We all have our things. But I just remember that night, I think he was the only photographer there, all these, self-important writers. And he just joined in and loved it. And I wasn't afraid of anything. I did any new experience. I love that about him. And I'll miss that.
Just one little thing about Kurt is also, thanks to the Lions, they did a nice job. Recognize him in the press box, made an announcement about his contributions and his work, covering the team for so long, going back to the Silverdome, obviously. But also they did a little, honored him there's a photographer's workroom in the basement where they put up a nice little sign for him and some flowers, and they invited his son, Kurt Jr., to come, and so he spent a little time with us in the press box, and
that's awesome.
We got to see him, so it was very gracious of the Lions to acknowledge Kurt and all of his work over the years.
And that tells you what kind of photographer he was, what kind of fella he was, right? Because it wasn't just the Lions. The Tigers released a statement. I think the Pistons released a statement. Right? I hadn't seen one for the Wings, but I'm sure. But we're gonna miss him as a big, big loss. But we move forward, right?
Yeah, we
have to. And you need to move forward back to your next column, which I will look forward to reading. And,
if I don't move forward, Kirkland's going to call me pretty soon and was like, where is that thing? Tell him. You talked to Shawn.
Yeah. No, he was, Kirkland is our editor, of course, and I said, I'm not sure if I can do this. He's like, well, see how you feel around 5 or so. And I'm like, okay, you really want me to do it. So hopefully the voice wasn't too painful, but it's good to see you, my man. And you and I will catch up soon. Do you mind taking us out and thanking the people?
Yeah. Hope you feel better, Shawn, and look forward to all your coverage from Houston, from the Wolverines. I'm sure to be victorious national championship victory over Washington. In fact, Kirk went to Washington State, which is close enough. He probably would have been rooting for the Huskies, I bet. But I don't know. Maybe he hated them.
That's their rival, right? Yeah.
He's a Seattle guy, though.
We have another editor, Ryan.
He's an editor. He doesn't count. No.
Yeah.
So we have to thank Robin Chan, our executive producers, Kirk Crawford and Anjanette Delgado, and our editor, Nicole Avery Nichols, but mostly our our listener out there who's sure to join us for our next, probably Wednesday, right, Shawn? Or we'll record Wednesday and it'll come out Thursday, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll figure it out. So the antibiotics will have kicked in by then.
Good.
I hope.
Good.
Yeah. All right, bud, get back to it. Good to see you. And thanks for listening, folks. We will talk to you all later in the week when we're back with more Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn.